Okay, so let's begin with a little meditation. So we do. Relax your body, relax your mind. Whatever worries there are, remind yourself that everything ultimately is okay. In the face of impermanence, a year from now, 5 years from now, the things that are so traumatic and worrisome now will seem very trivial. Place your attention on the breathing. Having developed some concentration on the gross level, now bring your attention to a more subtle object, the nature of the mental consciousness. Let go of your attention to the breathing. Recognize all appearances to your senses as appearing within that consciousness, within the spaciousness of the mind, clear and knowing. And especially the objects of the mental consciousness, as you withdraw your attention especially to your heart chakra, away from the senses, away from the distractive senses, to the cave of your heart. All of the appearances within the consciousness, the seemingly objective images and sounds, words, conversations, the subjective-like emotions, all arising within the same nature of the mind, same taste, clear light, non-obstructing, unobstructive. Perhaps this sense of the body still remains. Let go of that, let go of your attention to that, and let that, again, consciousness withdraw further to the heart. The sense of an ego, an observer, the person that we think is unhappy or excited or attached or angry. Making the situation worse. Let go of your attention to that and refocus instead on the spaciousness of the mind within which it's arising. Even the mental image you're developing of the consciousness is as yet still an imagination of the consciousness. Let go of that also and try to sense, as though really touching, experiencing the clear light nature within which that image also is embedded. The wisdom cognizing this nature of my mind is more accurately labeled as I, more accurately I, conventional I, than the self I usually think of myself as, which is grasped at as truly existent. It's for a very brief moment that I have this opportunity of leisure and freedom, endowment. This lifespan is constantly eroding, and as though I'm falling through time to the next rebirth. But if I'm honest in investigating in my own mind, I'm usually creating the causes for something unfavorable in the future. completely overwhelmed by the self-cherishing thought and its root, the self-grasping ignorance. Under their influence, I'm overcome by practicing the 8 worldly concerns, oblivious of the Buddha's teachings on the truth of the Four Noble Truths, that all of this ordinary samsaric life that we experience is of the nature of dukkha, being unsatisfactory, suffering. Nothing that we need envy within cyclic existence. Beauty, fame, companionship, wealth, power, all of it transient, all of it not bringing real pleasure, only momentary relief that we've experienced numberless times in the past but never were satisfied with. The person of intermediate capacity wishing to escape from this cycle, not just from lower rebirth in the future, but to escape from samsara, motivated out of renunciation practices, the 3 higher trainings, ethics, concentration, and wisdom. But we long, having heard the Buddha's teachings, for something even greater. All living beings exactly the same as us, exactly the same plight, wanting to be free of suffering, wanting to be happy. We have a debt to them from numberless lifetimes, an equality with them. They're like a precious treasure that we can use to overcome all the faults from our mind, our self-cherishing thought, by using them as the object of our cherishing, our wish for happiness. All living beings, not just ourselves. Seeing the disadvantages more and more every week of the self-cherishing thought. Recognizing that to embrace the welfare of all sentient beings is the doorway of all good qualities. Overcoming our selfishness and our self-centeredness, even though it's so natural, it seems almost impossible to overcome sometime. That's our worst enemy. So with a thought to develop these good qualities, overcoming our self-cherishing thought, developing a cherishing of others, and the actual wish, authentic wish to attain enlightenment for their welfare, seeing that that's the best way to bring about their happiness. With faith in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, with faith in the virtue of listening to the Dharma, accumulating the wisdom of hearing, contemplation, wisdom, arisen from meditation. I'm going to participate tonight to better understand my mind, to overcome my faults, develop good qualities, especially to listen to the Mahayana thought training, the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, for the welfare of all living beings. And relax. Bring your attention back. How's everyone? Bonnie, you snuck in. Okay. How are we doing? Any questions about our what we've been studying? Venerable, you look like you have some. No? Just a wee one? Didn't we go over the test last time? Oh, we didn't go over the test. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I didn't bring a copy with me, so who can lend me? Can someone lend me? Yeah. Did you write your answers on a separate sheet? Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. Good. Okay. Do you have your test? Oh, good. Okay. Dorji, you have your test? Okay. Okay. The dog ate it, huh? Make sure the dog doesn't eat you. Okay. First question. List the 8 worldly dharmas. So that question is going to be for Don. Wait. The 8 worldly dharmas are pleasure and pain? That's a worldly dharma? Pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and dishonor. Does that sound similar to your list? It's different from yours. What does yours say?
Wanting to be happy, not wanting to be unhappy. Wanting to hear pleasant sounds, not wanting to hear unpleasant sounds. Wanting praise, not wanting criticism. Wanting material possessions, not wanting to be without material possessions.
Mm-hmm. Does that sound the same? What's the difference? What would the...
One of those sounded the same.
Pardon?
Fame and dishonor are a bit similar to praise and criticism.
No, I think you also had praise and blame. Huh?
Yeah, that's what it sounds.
Praise, blame. So the way that those can be kind of rationalized, or you can kind of see the similarity, is that one is talking about, in a sense, Islamic Supreme Rinpoche says, craving to hear sweet, ego-pleasing words and sounds. What would that be? Praise? And what, did we have something blame and fame and dishonor? Well, there's two different. Well, you might be mixing up. Yeah. Wishing to be praised and not to be blamed. That's one thing. But here, the fame and infamy, or fame and dishonor, or whatever. What else did you call it? What did you call it, Venerable? Did you call it? What did you call it?
I said not wanting to hear unpleasant sounds and wanting to hear pleasant sounds.
And then the next one after that?
Mine was wanting praise and not wanting criticism.
So you should, praise and blame, or criticism, that's one set, Don. And fame and infamy, or desiring to hear sweet, ego-pleasing things, is a little bit different than praise. This is like desiring to be famous, desiring to hear. Islamic Supreme Rinpoche says desiring for people to tell you they love you. To hear those 3 words. In English, anyway. I don't know. In Italian, was it 2 words? Very important. Okay, not bad. So, Karen, list the 4 opponent forces. What are they opponents of, by the way?
done an action that was negative. Resolve never to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Reliance on the three jewels.
Mm-hmm.
And the remedy, which might be mantra or another practice to help overcome the negative karma.
So does that, I've forgotten, who, this young lady who works at the school, what's your name? What's your name? Lillian, yeah. Is that right? What about reliance? Is just relying, what did you say, relying on the triple gem? Is that the power of reliance? Do you know? So in order to purify negative karma, we need to, the Buddha said, we could purify any negative karma by relying on these four powerful forces, opponent forces. And as Karen said, one of them is the power of regret. So that means remorse. That's not the same as guilt, right? Very different than guilt. Power of resolving not to do it again, or vowing. Like, for instance, the reason that we take vows is to be able to overcome the habitual tendency of doing the actions again and again. Does that make sense? Like, what's going to stop you from doing the action again and again? Making a resolve or vow. And that's one of the reasons that the Buddha gave the vows of a lay person, vows of monks and nuns and so forth, to help overcome that habitual result. Then the power of reliance, there's the meaning, Karen, I think like this. My teacher, Trijang Rinpoche, said that when you fall down, you have to rely on the ground to get up, right? So we can fall down, we can have downfall or create negativity with respect to two kinds of objects: the triple gem and sentient beings. So if you fall down with respect to the triple gem, how do you rely on them? As you said, taking refuge. If you fall down with respect to sentient beings, how do you rely on them? Bonnie? Acts of kindness, random acts of kindness, generating bodhicitta. So that power, the specific acts of kindness. So the power of power of reliance has two parts. It kind of like the motivation that we do at the beginning of our practices. We take refuge and generate bodhicitta. So that's the power of reliance. And then the power of antidotes. Is it things like saying mantras? Is that the only thing? That's what you said? Practices. In some of the Buddha's teachings, it gives different kinds of antidotes to create virtue, to try to compensate for the negative karma that we've created. And that includes many different things, like reading the sutras. Like if you read the Heart Sutra or the Vajracutter Sutra or the Sugata Sutra, those are things that fall into that category. How about the recitation of Vajrasattva mantra? Is that which power is that? Or is that none of those powers? That's the power of... That's the power of this one that we're talking about now, the antidote or remedy. Actually, they're all purifying. All those four opponent forces help to purify. But in the case of Vajrasattva, the visualization and the imagining of light or nectar or whatever, and the recitation of the mantra single-pointedly, those fall under the category of the power of the remedy. So if you were doing Vajrasattva, you'd also want to feel regret in there. And at the end of the session, usually there's a verse where you resolve not to do the actions again. And in the preparation, you take refuge and generate bodhicitta. Also things like cleaning stupas. Yesterday, Venerable, what's the nun's name at Lama Zopa's house? No. Munsel. Venerable Munsel cleaned the stupa over at Rinpoche's house. So it's something like that. We're painting stupas. Making images. Karen, remember the course? Drawing images of the Buddha, making images, constructing things like that, or working at a Dharma center. All of these kinds of things. Or as Bonnie says, random acts of kindness, dedicating them, say for instance, if you've been miserly, to help overcome that, to be generous. Okay. And then, so list the 7 methods of cause and effect to generate bodhicitta. This one is for Sister Elaine. I don't know. You must be clairvoyant.
You know, I didn't look this up, and I wrote this class last time, so I don't even know if I'm on the right page. So
Uh-oh.
I said, recognizing all sentient beings as mothers, remembering the kindness of mothers, wishing to repay the kindness, wishing to remove suffering, wishing to give every happiness, recognizing that now I can't really help, and wishing to attain enlightenment so that I can.
Is that right? Is that right? I'm not sure. Is that right? I'm not sure. Close. First of all, they say ma she. First one is called ma she. Ma means mother, like ama. Shepa means to know that living beings have been mother, recognizing sentient beings as mother. Second one, what did you say second was?
Recognizing the kindness.
Recognizing their kindness. Remembering how they've been kind, not just they've been intimately related. The third one?
Wishing to repay it.
Repaying, developing the sense of obligation to repay their kindness. That doesn't necessarily come naturally, but if you have a strong sense of their kindness, it's said, the Lamas say that will follow, but sometimes you have to actually think about it. Then the fourth one?
Wishing to take all of their suffering.
Wishing to take all of their suffering away. That's not exactly in the actual order. Who knows what the fourth one is called? Happiness first?
I mean, having great love for them first, and the fifth is
Having great love is not this one either.
Disadvantages of self-judgment. Meditate on the disadvantages of self-judgment.
No, not disadvantages of self-serving. No. This one is what's called. This is in the 7 causes. What? Ningje chambun mare. This one is what's called affectionate love. It's different than regular love. This is what's called what is it? Yongwei Jamba. This one is developing a sense of the dearness of others. Is different than regular love. Regular love is, as you are familiar with, I think, ordinary meaning of love is a mind which wishes to endow others with happiness. Right? Yongwei Jamba, this one, or affectionate love or heartwarming love, is not full-fledged love. It's a cause of love and cause of compassion. Because actually, the next one after, we'll go back to Yongwei Jamba again in a second, but the next one after that was what?
So I said it was to remove their suffering.
Okay, the next one is what is called great compassion, which is more than just compassion. It's sort of taking the responsibility oneself to take away their suffering. So that one, great compassion, if there's great compassion, there will be in the continuum the potential to have great love also, it said. Because they're like love and compassion are like two sides of a coin. If one has been generated, the other will also be generated just when you look at a different aspect. Great compassion senses the suffering of others and wants them to be free of that, taking the responsibility. I must alleviate their suffering, those that have been my mother. Great love senses them to be bereft of happiness and wishes that they have happiness, and that I will try to bring that happiness about. So this one, the fourth one, affectionate love, is not exactly great love, is not exactly the full meaning of love. It's something which has been generated that when looking at sentient beings, perhaps through the agency of remembering that they've been mother and kind, just one's heart warms to them and one feels affectionate toward them. It's not necessarily conjoined with the thought, I must bring them happiness, but it's a cause of that. in the seven methods of cause and effect, the main method of developing affectionate love is recalling that all sentient beings have been your mother. In the equalizing and exchanging self and others, it extends to that. There are greater methods to understand how sentient beings have been kind, even when they've been strangers, or even when they're enemies, right? And so developing a warmness toward them, seeing that they're the agencies for us to overcome our faults, to develop good qualities. So those are some of the things that go into developing that fourth cause, that heartwarming love. Fifth one, great compassion. Sixth one, what did you call it, Venerable? Oh.
Well, I said that I recognize that I can't really help them, So I have a wish to help, but I recognize my shortcomings. So I have a wish then to attain enlightenment.
So which one is the sixth one?
Sixth one is recognizing that I can't do much now.
Is that right?
Well, she always said feeling responsible. So
Right.
that, those together, I think we're on the same.
Yeah. This one is what's called in Tibetan, we call laksam, the exceptional thought. So it's something that goes beyond great compassion and thinks I myself must alleviate all the it's like the way Lama Zopa Rinpoche often says, I'm by myself alone, sort of thing. I myself must develop the happiness of all sentient beings, alleviate their suffering. And also, so what His Holiness called, you could, make it kind of a little more, how to say, easy. What His Holiness calls politically correct, universal responsibility. Taking on the responsibility of all sentient beings to leave, that you yourself, giving up your own thought of cherishing yourself and so forth. And then it's at that point that one begins to analyze whether you can actually do that. And when you recognize that you're not in a position to do that, which is not that point, it's in the analysis of the seventh point. It's that when you develop the point, the thought that thinks, well, in order to bring about their happiness, I must attain enlightenment. Therefore, that seventh member is what's called the result. There's 6 causes and a result. They call the 7 the causes and results. So there's 6 causes. They're all, each of them is results of a previous kind of understanding, of course, but the final result is bodhicitta. Okay, that's good. And then, so, let's see here. Diane, what does it mean? The next one, explain what is meant by taking adverse conditions into the path. Did you? Well, everyone's clairvoyant tonight. This is incredible. Elaine knew I.
Exactly what you're getting at. So I kind of listed different ways that you could use obstacles or experiences of suffering
Uh-huh.
on the path.
Okay. What does it mean to take adverse conditions into the path?
So to use experiences of suffering or unpleasant situations and then turn them into practice, so to see that, like for example, if you're experiencing some suffering, then to see that it's results of negative karma that you created in the past and see that that's a result of self-cherishing
Right.
mind and then
So just like, without even giving the details, but giving the examples would be very good, but taking adverse conditions, what is meant by that means that in this degenerate age, in general, I mean, any time, even at the time of the Buddha, if there were things that arose, your baby left you, your things were stolen, you were sick, you were, I don't know what else, all sorts of things could happen that could be bad conditions that you might think are not right conditions to practice. There's noise next door, so you can't meditate. Oh my gosh, how can I meditate? It's impossible. How can I do prostrations? People are always asking me for help. How can I practice Dharma? People are always asking me to help them. It's interesting, huh? What do you think? Did that ever occur to you? Like you want to do, you have your mind on a particular practice, and I'm going to do this, and then someone says, "Please, I need to talk to you. My heart's broken." Big obstacle to my practice of Dharma. So to recognize what the mind recognizes as adverse conditions, to have a method to transform them into that which actually enhances your path. Okay, that's what it means taking adverse conditions into the path, transforming them. So, Diana, what are some of the things that you thought of? What were some of the examples?
Well, one, like I already said, to just see that it's a result of negative actions you've created in the past, and that's a result of your self-cherishing, so that possibly in the future you wouldn't create those negative actions.
So, seeing it as the result of your negative karma. So, how does that help? You just, it's just like putting the blame somewhere else now.
Well, no, but then you see that negative karma was created as a result of your own self-cherishing mind.
Yeah. Then.
And that if you want to create a situation in the future where you don't have to experience that type of suffering, then you can not create those same.
So that requires understanding about karma, and understanding this arose because of my karma, and that if I don't overcome self-cherishing thought, I'll continue to create that karma. How does that transform the condition? Doesn't it still bum you out? So how's that been transformed? Bonnie, what do you think? That particular point.
With that particular.
No, I was asking Bonnie, but she thought with that particular point that Diana's saying. So, say you recognize it as your karma, and then you don't want to. If you don't want to suffer, you have to. You shouldn't create the negative karma. But as I said, doesn't that bum you out? And she says yes. So that would seem like that would be an obstacle.
No, because then you can also rejoice that you're experiencing that negative karma now, and you don't have to experience it in one of the lower realms. That would be another way to look at it. Or also to see the emptiness of the.
Well, what about just seeing it as having exhausted your negative karma? It's like having paid off your debt, so to speak. So there's a certain kind of mind, rather than being bummed out, like the usual kind of mind. Do you say that, bummed out? Rather than being upset about it, which is the usual response, it's just a gesture, just a way of turning the mind in a different way, to see it in a positive aspect, to see that there's something constructive about it, to see it as your guru. The guru is giving you a wrathful lesson. Life is giving you a wrathful lesson. Okay, good. So, 5, what factors are necessary to understand to penetrate the vital point of self-cherishing? Carrie, what do you think?
I wrote to see that self-cherishing is not desirable, to turn problems around and focus on what you did to create the problem.
Wait a second, let's hold on a second. So first of all, to see what?
To see that self-cherishing is not desirable.
To see that self-cherishing is not desirable.
To turn problems around and focus on what you did to create the problem.
To turn the problem around?
The problem, from, put this correctly, like just what we were discussing here about the issues of, seeing that your self-cherishing at some point caused you to do an action, and so then this karma ripens, and you have something come back to you which maybe offends your self-cherishing nature, and you get in a snit just to see that.
A snit, eh?
And so then, just to, be able to turn it around and see that, the problem is really your problem to begin with, and maybe you're burning up karma or.
So does that? What's the meaning here of penetrating the vital point?
The vital point, self-cherishing is the root of one of the roots of our problems, that we act from the self-cherishing nature that I deserve this, so
right.
I should be able to.
Right. Okay. But say, what's the meaning of vital point? What's the terminology vital point? Because it came in the text at the beginning of the explanation of the text, quite a extensive explanation about what that meant.
Vital point.
Do you remember?
Is that it's that way of getting that to destroy the self-cherishing thought. That it's
to be able to identify something exactly, to know where it is, how to extricate it. That's to recognize the vital point Like say the example of the butcher with the needle, long pin that they can place in a certain nerve or whatever, and without a lot of effort, knowing the vital point, they can cause the bull, the wild bull of our anger, so to speak, to expire. So if you know the vital point, how to find the self-cherishing thought, like for instance, if you were doing Tonglen, you know what Tonglen is? Does anyone not know what Tonglen is? Do you know what Tonglen is? Back there? Yeah.
Don't ask me this time, please.
No, I'm not going to ask you about it, but you know what Tonglen is.
I knew you were gonna call me.
This is amazing. I think it's a couple days after the full moon. Everyone is clairvoyant tonight. This is incredible. You knew I was going to call on you too.
I sat here and I kept saying, I'm gonna say prayers, so he does that something.
And they didn't work. They didn't work.
They didn't work. What is that?
What is that?
And I heard some of those here.
You're clairvoyant, but you've exhausted your merit.
That's right, clairvoyant.
But do you know what Tonglen means?
Prayers aren't working.
You know what Tonglen means?
Yes.
What do just the two words mean?
Breathing in, I don't really know.
Tongwa means to give.
Okay, so
Lempa, okay, so now you know, Tongwa means to give, Lempa means to take.
well, so take in the suffering.
Giving and taking. So you don't have to do it with breathing. You don't have to do it with breathing. That's one particular kind of method that what can do Tonglen. Tonglen basically is a practice that's based on having recognized the disadvantages of the self-cherishing thought and the advantages of cherishing others. Okay?
Isn't that the vital, we use that to go to the vital point to destroy the self, is it the self-cherishing? Is that what we do with it?
Self-cherishing is a kind of attitude, right? Is a mind, is a state of mind, right? Something that resides within our consciousness. So how do you eliminate that? What's the vital point? Is it just simply doing Tonglen? Imagining taking on suffering and giving up one's happiness?
But isn't it to be able to hit that, I mean, isn't that the purpose of this whole?
Yeah, but I'm trying to give us an opportunity to see a little more clearly, because the text the author of the text, Dharmarakshita, placed a lot of emphasis on the importance of recognizing the vital point. Like for instance, in overcoming self-grasping, not just self-cherishing, you have to identify that and know the antidote to that. Otherwise, you can just say, oh, I'm going to meditate on emptiness, selflessness. Selflessness. There's no self. It's selflessness. Empty. Everything's empty. You just say things to yourself or imagine space. That's like taking the needle and putting it in the buffalo's leg or in their tail or in their horns, and the buffalo's looking at their ear and the buffalo's looking at you and shaking its head. It doesn't really, that's not the vital point. So self-cherishing, how can we penetrate the vital point of self-cherishing? Well, one of the methods here that's taught, we could say Tonglen, that's not the only method, but all of these methods of training the mind are to try to get the vital point of self-cherishing. But we have to recognize what self-cherishing is. It's not me. For instance, if I take on suffering, say there's some work to be done, some loss to be, what's the word, had? Yeah. Loss to be experienced, loss to be, defeat to be experienced, to be taken on. And I think, okay, I'm going to take that on in order to eliminate the self-cherishing thought. I will feel miserable for the benefit of others. Will that touch the vital point of the self-cherishing? Do you put it on yourself, the suffering?
For me, the way I interpret it in my limited mind is that for me, what happens is I notice the self-cherishing, and maybe I'm wrong about this, probably am. It comes up at points of adversity. So then I feel that attachment or mine or that pain of that. And then it is that I turn around through trying to take a look at that and release that in a more caring and compassionate way. So in other words, like something, like if I'm miserly about something.
If you what? Miserly about something.
About something, or we'll use the text word miserly about something. You know, then I work more on generosity, so that aspect of myself that might be miserly is kind of whittled away. That's the only way I can understand.
Okay, so that wouldn't be exactly penetrating the vital point. We'd be spending lots of years and lifetimes developing good qualities. We'd be sticking the needle in the buffalo's ear and in their leg and in their tail and every place else, but not penetrating the.
So know where the point is.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have to find it within. That's what I paid you for. You didn't pay me. I didn't get anything. Okay. So good point. So where's the self-cherishing thought? Where's the self-cherishing thought? Is it in the body, in our body? For instance, if we just take pain on and we feel suffering, which is a mental, actually suffering is something we experience within consciousness, whether it be sense consciousness or mental consciousness, does that cause our self-cherishing to decrease? Simply experiencing suffering? Not necessarily. I mean, there's lots of people that are suffering and that doesn't get rid of their self-cherishing thought. So we have to, what I was suggesting is a way to, is explained in the teachings on Tonglen, let's say. First of all, on the basis of heartwarming love, okay, feeling affection for others, and developing actual love, wanting them to be happy, wanting them to be free of suffering. That's as a basis, right? So you have to have that as a basis, first of all. Otherwise, you're not going to be able, that's like the tool. That's one of the tools. Even you find the vital spot and all you have is a toothpick, or you have just a mosquito's stinger, that's not going to be able to cause the buffalo to expire, right? You need to have the tool, this long needle. So one of the tools is this combination of love and compassion, wanting others to be happy, wanting them to be free of suffering. Without that, that's why we have to spend time on these subsidiary meditations. Second thing is especially to recognize the defects of the self-cherishing thought and the advantages of cherishing others. To spend some time seeing the disadvantages of self-cherishing, how it, like the text is always telling, every single thing that goes wrong with us is a result of our self-cherishing thought. It's the wheel of sharp weapons coming back from wrongs that we have done, that we've perpetrated, right? To start, rather than blaming others, to blame society, to blame Land of Medicine Buddha or George, it's always George's fault. This is why you paid me, right? As you said. I'm joking. To put the onus on the self-cherishing thought and to see the benefits of cherishing others. So this is kind of the motivation that's going to cause you to be able to do this practice of Tonglen. In seeing the defects of the self-cherishing thought, you have to have a general idea what it is. Maybe you haven't identified it yet. So now the process with those two things is like you've got the needle and a very strong needle and a motivation to put it in, but now you have to find the right place. So you have to find the self-cherishing thought. So you imagine the suffering of other sentient beings, let's say, and you imagine taking that on. Out of love, you want them to be, out of compassion, you want them to be free of suffering, first of all. It's said in the teachings, between giving and taking, first you take on the suffering of others before you before they can appreciate what you give, in essence. So you take away, you imagine taking on their suffering, and as you do so, you're trying to see the response within your own mind that is resistant to that. That is beginning to help you to identify the self-cherishing thought, the mind that's resistant, that doesn't really want to, not just simply saying, I'm taking on the suffering of all sentient beings, giving all my happiness and virtues. That doesn't necessarily touch the self-cherishing thought. You have to imagine taking on the cancer, the unhappiness, the loneliness of others, and putting that, it's seeing that your continuum would experience that, and see what the response is in the mind. It's not punishing the self. It's a way of eroding the self-cherishing thought. And you can start to identify it then. When you start to feel some sort of hesitancy to do that, that's kind of an indication that you found that vital point. Otherwise, it's like the example I gave many times of like a sliver in the hands. If you haven't found the actual point, you're putting the needle in, or mom's taking it out with the needle, right? The sliver. And it's like, no problem. That's not it. Ah! When you find the vital spot, something hurts. So when there's some resistance in the mind to doing that, and I don't mean like a wisdom that says you shouldn't do this, but the self-cherishing thought that sort of like this little devil demon in our mind saying, oh, don't bother, what about, why should you suffer? This is not your problem.
Well, okay, you said two things there at the end.
Is that all?
And
Okay.
I'm trying to remember them. So you said, one, when you take it on, you said the difference, not, so you feel the resistance. I have that.
Yeah.
Take on the suffer. I don't want to suffer. I've suffered enough. Thank you very much. So, I feel that,
Hmm?
So, okay, but there's a difference. There's a distinction. There's a subtlety there. So,
It's not as though that you are just making yourself a martyr. You're going to say, I'm washing all the pans and the pots. I'm going to do it for the welfare of all sentient beings, and just feel miserable.
No, but what I'm trying to ascertain here is the difference. When do you know that you have kind of honed in on that self-cherishing vital spot?
I think it increases your certainty of that, the clarity of that increases over time. When you first begin, there may be some fear, there may be no fear at all in doing something, but if there is some fear and trepidation, then you have to sort of try to see within your mind what it is that's causing you, what sort of state of mind that's preventing you from taking on that defeat or that suffering. It's a mind that wants the happiness of this lifetime, wants me to prosper. I'm important, not thinking of the long-term, spiritual growth and the benefit of sentient beings. So again, when you see that, you have to sort of argue a little bit in order to even try to take on the suffering. Imagine taking on the suffering. See the benefits, and then see the resistance still within the mind, and recognize that that can be eroded away, that self-cherishing thought can be eroded.
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was talking about there. Okay. So 6, did I skip one here like in the other class? No. What must one do to eliminate the ignorance of self-grasping? Bonnie, what must one do to eliminate the ignorance of self-grasping?
Understand the falsity of the view of a real personal identity.
Understand the falsity of the view of a real personal identity. So, in other words, to develop an understanding, that is, understand that the particular ignorance in our mind that's grasping to this is wrong. It is baseless. That particular mind, we might not call it ignorance. We might think, yeah, that's a mind. It's recognizing the I. How can you call that ignorance? That's just smart. That's being smart. Knows who I am. But as you said, it's understanding that that is false. It's a wisdom. One has to develop the wisdom that is an exact antidote of that ignorance. The ignorance is not just like something oblivious of something, like ignorance is bliss or something, ignorance of the self. The self is there and you don't know it. That's not what the ignorance of self-grasping is, right? Ignorance of self-grasping is actually a misdirected kind of wisdom. It's a discriminating factor which is apprehending that I and assenting to it, believing that it does exist that way. So you have to, in order to cause that ignorance to diminish, in order to eliminate it, you have to actually develop the wisdom that sees that its object, that it's believing in, doesn't exist the way that that ignorance is believing. By cultivating that wisdom, the wisdom of selflessness, again and again, that can cause that ignorance to be abandoned, to disappear from our mind. Venerable.
Would you say ignorance is a mistaken wisdom consciousness?
In some of the teachings, it says that ignorance here, when we talk about the ignorance of emptiness and selflessness and so forth, it does not mean just a not knowing, such as in the general sense of ignorance of karma, ignorance of past and future lives, not knowing them. But here the ignorance is one that is actually grasping to something which is not true. It's actually a misdirected wisdom. It's a discriminating factor of our mind which is looking the wrong way. Say for instance, thinking that knowing that you want to be happy, but looking for happiness in the wrong place. That would be kind of something similar. That's not the ignorance of selflessness. It's actually, we want to be happy. Everyone wants to be happy, but thinking that you'll find it in worldly possessions or you'll completely be satisfied in personal relationships or love relationship or having power or being the boss or having wealth or pleasure of the senses. That won't really, that's an ignorant kind of consciousness. But here the ignorance that we're talking about is believing that that I actually exists. And then 7, give examples from your own life of applying at least 2 verses from the Wheel of Sharp Weapons. So we're going to, Dorji is going to give one, or he's put his finger up for 2. You're going to do 2?
No, we have 2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes left. Right? I knew that. I was just teasing him because he doesn't like to answer a question.
George, the last question though, if all you do is cultivate that wisdom, then that's not all you need to, right?
If you cultivated the wisdom which was the antidote to ignorance of self-grasping, what else would you have to do?
Well, I mean, I think ultimately that's the direct perception of entities, which is separate from cultivating wisdom, and then you have to develop concentration too. So.
Yeah, well, good. When we talk about the 4 reliances, I mentioned a couple times during the course, don't rely on the person of the teacher, rely on their words. Don't rely on the beauty or the euphony of the words, rely on the meaning. Don't rely on the interpretative meaning, rely on the definitive meaning. And then finally, don't rely on just an intellectual understanding of that, but rely on a direct realization. So it's true. You have to, to develop that wisdom and bring it to culmination in meditation. So let's take a little break. We're going to leave the last question till next time. Give examples from your own life of applying at least 2 verses from the Wheel of Sharp Weapons. Otherwise, otherwise we won't go along any further here. And so last time, do you remember which verse we finished with?
63?
63? Good. That's what I had. 63. Okay. So we said, although my learning is scant, my penchant for empty verbiage is great. I think it said, I boast in speaking about emptiness. It's not so much talking about empty verbiage, unless you take that to mean talk about emptiness. Empty verbiage usually means no sense, right? Sort of like, okay. although the extent of my religious instructions is slight, the text more or less says, although the extent of my scriptural understanding is slight, I pretend to understand everything. Okay. This is a manifestation of our self-cherishing thought. So 64. Although my companions and underlings are numerous, not one is dependable. Underlings. That sounds interesting. Pardon?
That's a real Dharma word.
Yeah, underlings. Koryok Mangla. Kor means attendants or companions. Yokpa means those who assist us. It could be like servants. Like this could be talking about people in a dharma sense, in a good situation, lamas or whatever, that have an entourage of people and servants. Although there are many, kuken suyang me. There's no one who carries the load. That means kind of, here it says no one is dependable. That means that no one who actually does, in the case of of those around you, not carrying kurken would be someone who would carry on their responsibilities of taking your advice, putting your teachings into practice, and the yokpa, the domestics or servants or people that are assisting you, they don't do what they are meant to be doing. They don't cook the meals, they don't clean the place, they don't help the people that are coming to visit and receive teachings and so forth. So they're not carrying their load. Although I have many masters, not one is a reliable protector. Pompo Mangla Gyapten Gundang Del. I am devoid of protectors, masters, how to say, who are gyapten. Gyap means back, ten means rely. So something that like you can rely on, you can lean back on. So although I have a lot of masters, here it doesn't mean spiritual masters. Pombo kind of means, this might mean yourself, that you have people that are in a position to oversee you, but they don't take care of you. So this is the result also of our past negative karma. In the past, when we were in a position of responsibility, we did not take responsibility to take care of those that we were responsible for. And so when we're in that kind of position again, these are the kind of karmic results of that. The people that are around us don't do their jobs and so forth. It's something that we can start to see in our own lives. And 65, although I have high status, my merit is less than an evil spirit's. Actually, it says my qualities are less than than a ghost, literally. J. Yunden means like knowledge or qualities. So many times we find ourselves being put in a high position, but we don't have very good we don't have very high qualities. That can be very, very detrimental because it can cause the ego to rise and pride to be generated, and then fear when your status is threatened, rather than recognizing that status is something that is transitory, thinking that it's something that's your due, isn't it? Although I have high status, my merit is less than an evil spirit's. Although I am a great religious teacher, my passions are grosser than a demon's. Than Mara's.
That seems like it's contradictory. A great spiritual teacher, yet my passions are just almost like out of control or something.
Yeah, I think the explanation is that oftentimes in Tibet, people had a certain title, credential, being called a lama. And this is kind of saying, although you're High Lama, it's called High Lama, it's, George Rinpoche or something like that, Whoa, the great Lama. Just having a name like that, having a certain credential is not so important. In fact, it can be a great problem. Some of the great lamas don't like to be recognized in any way. Sometimes, I think the only ones that are really worthy of actually playing that game are the people that really have control of their minds. Then they use that status, that credential, so to speak, to be able to benefit others. Otherwise, it becomes a big burden for yourself if you don't have those qualities. So these are the karmic results of having sought high status in the past, and so that one of the really, can ripen. You can have high status, but you don't necessarily have the abilities that are requisite for that. Here, let me read you what Geshe says. This verse is also about great teachers and leaders. Without proper education and the cultivation of virtuous qualities, they cannot lead others properly and will mislead them under the influence of their evil inner demons. There was once a very great and famous Tibetan Lama who held the position of Ganden Chipa, the head of the Ganden, here says Ganden monastery. I guess at that time it was Ganden, now we say the Ganden tradition. He said that if he had not studied the Dharma from the time he was very young, if he had not experienced so many hardships, he would not have been able to teach so well. I think this is talking about Redding Rinpoche, who was the tutor to the last Dalai Lama, the regent. It was because of his intense studies and difficult circumstances that he became a great teacher. To be a good teacher, you must spend a great deal of time in preparation. You cannot be a proper teacher if you continue to rely on the inner demons of the view of a real personal identity and the self-cherishing attitude, Geshe says. Okay. So, like I said last time, sometimes I think there's a great advantage in this degenerate age in not having high status. If you're actually put in a position of high status, there's a lot of responsibility, and it's only something that you should take on when your gurus see some benefit for it. Otherwise, it can be kind of cheating others, and you'll be using up your influence, your charisma, so to speak, your karma, to be able to have that status when you don't have anything to benefit others. I almost much rather save it, that status, for a time when you actually have some quality to benefit others, maybe later in your life or in a future life. Sometimes I think also, sometimes people always want to see the lamas. The squeezing, I'm going to see. It's almost like you have a certain karma to see them, almost like I'd rather wait and use it at a time when I've got some real questions, something essential, rather than just aimlessly out of status saying, I got to see the Lama, Does that make any sense? 66. Although my view is lofty, my behavior is worse than a dog's. Well, this is nice. Fabrizio and I were translating a text that Lama Zopa Rinpoche asked him to translate on advice to the laity, and there's one verse in there that talks about something about giving up these bad attitudes like dog excrement. And I was thinking of the same thing here. You always talk about dogs in these. Although my view is lofty, my behavior is worse than a dog's. So this is talking about, because these texts were written for not just the general laity, but particularly for spiritual aspirants. This is talking about, someone who, to use this for one's own practice. Although one's view is lofty, meaning although one believes in the Mahayana, although one believes in the Prasangika view, the view of emptiness, one has this high view, but in reality, it doesn't connect with your actual behavior. You behave in a way that's worse than a dog. do you ever, maybe I certainly see that in my own mind. I don't know if you see that in your own mind. But someone today, was that on the telephone? I can't remember. Someone was asking me about the difference between the Vajrayana and the Mahayana. Is Vajrayana not part of Mahayana? What is the Vajrayana? Sort of the tantric path, right? The Vajra vehicle. Actually, from Lama Tsongkhapa's point of view, the Mahayana has both the Sutra path, the Sutrayana or the Bodhisattvayana, and the Vajrayana. They're both part of the Mahayana. So it's not like Mahayana is one thing and Vajrayana is something else. So although we have maybe high views, lofty view, tantric, I'm a tantric practitioner, I've taken tantric vows and so forth, I'm very high, but we can be, our behavior often is not very good. We're not thoughtful, we're not resourceful, we don't fulfill our obligations and so forth. Although I have a lot of knowledge, here it says good qualities are many. Here, Yonden Mangla, you might say my qualities are many. Their basis is carried off by the wind. Actually, it's more like, I think, Shima Lungla Shor. Lungla Shor means to toss something to the wind. Don't we say something like that in English? To toss something to the wind. There's another verse coming about pour something in the water. In Tibetan, both of them work. We don't usually say we tossed it to, he had a great fortune, but he tossed it to the wind. He had a lot of knowledge, like maybe tantric knowledge or other kinds of knowledge, but he tossed the basis of it away. The basis of it in this case would be, the basic teachings, the fundamentals, also moral discipline, ethics, and so forth. So although we might have some kind of knowledge, we can, if we're not careful, we can toss away the real basis for that, the real basis that can give rise to the fruits of those qualities. Oops. 67. All desires enter into me, and I blame all my quarrels on others for no reason. All desires enter into me. I think it looks like Shedo is a word in Tibetan that means the same as Rangdo. It means selfishness, doing just what you wish. So, all selfishness is deposited in my innermost being. Rangi puksu shuk. Every kind of selfishness, every kind of self-cherishing is there. And I blame all my quarrels on others without provocation, with no reason. Dunme. Shenla che. I couldn't find in any of the commentaries this particular word that I think also some of the other translation had a different word for this one also. I couldn't find it in any dictionary this, so I'm still looking for the commentary. There is a commentary in Tibetan for this text that I think both Geshe Darge and Geshe Sopa La were using because they make the same comments on some of the verses, but I don't have access to that to explain. This is some old language, Gyokor. Geshe-la's translate. Let's see, what are we, 68?
Numbers are off by one.
It's 68 though.
Oh yeah, no, 67, so it's 68 here. We have selfish desires and horrible anger. Here, the horrible anger is not right. I think they took she as meaning anger, as in shedang. Shedo, it just means I have every kind of selfishness within my innermost being. They said, which fester inside us, we would never admit. There's some commentary there that's not exactly literally what it says, but fester inside us, that's nice. Yet without provocation, we criticize others and self-righteously charge them with faults we possess. So I think this is getting closer to the meaning of this. So although I am the repository, it's festering inside of me, all sorts of selfishness, I put on others the blame. You know, I criticize others and charge them with faults without any kind of provocation, without any reason. Usually that's always the case. We always, Geshe Sopa always says, you know, we always like to think we are right all the time, even when we're with our spiritual friends, our spiritual masters, that we're most lovable, that we've done right, the others are wrong. Sometimes it gets very tiring, isn't it? Our own self-cherishing thought. And it's only through, actually, I think this is very, very beneficial, thinking about these things, because you start to see it in many different ways and really get fed up with it. Otherwise, it just seems like an enterprise. Working on the self-cherishing thought seems like some spiritual enterprise that's not very close to your own life. But if you actually see it affecting your own life again and again, then you can start to change your life. You can act in a different way. You don't have to let selfishness fester inside of you in your innermost being, and you don't have to, because of it, always find faults with others. Here it says, I blame all my quarrels on others, and the other text said, I self-righteously charge them with faults we possess. So this gyokor, I'm not sure which of those is more accurate. 68. Although I have put on the saffron robe, what does that mean? Is that like the saffron robe? Is this saffron?
The yellow ones.
The yellow one. This one's not saffron. What is this one called? The burgundy robe? Actually, it's supposed to be saffron also.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Okay.
In Tibet, the saffron, we say the 3 saffron robes of a monk include the lower garment. This is also one shade of saffron, like I think in Kashmir, the saffron is more red color. And the saffron in central Tibet is light yellow, and then there's another saffron, like on the namjar, the other robe that the monks wear. There's 2 upper robes. Often there's slightly different shades. It wasn't necessarily that way in India, but in Tibet there was a reason for wearing the robes of 3 different shades like that. The usual red burgundy upper garment that's worn is not one of the blessed robes. That's just kind of like an undergarment, like we say ngulen, to like absorbent, so you don't ruin the other one. So although I have put on the saffron robe, dressed in saffron, I appeal to evil spirits for protection.
Finally, a bad deed I haven't done.
Oh yeah? You think in past lives you didn't do this? Okay. No.
Anybody who's studied Dorje Shug, and the Dalai Lama said not to, wouldn't that qualify for this one?
I don't want to get into Dorje Shug then. It's a complicated issue. Excuse me as I'm chopping away here. The point of this is that oftentimes, as His Holiness says, oftentimes people put more credence in praying to spirits and certain protectors that may not actually be enlightened. Certainly our perception of them is not necessarily that they are enlightened beings, just that like something that they can protect us. It's like going to, when you have problems in school, you could go to see the principal, or if you have, let's say, if you have problems in the world, you could go to see your congressman, or you can appeal to the government, or you could go to the mafia, right? Or, the local thugs to get the street, street cleaned or something like that. So oftentimes, although we've put on saffron robes, in the indication of that is that we're taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, especially. Still, we appeal to evil spirits for protection. Although we've taken religious vows, we've taken them on, my behavior is demonic. The same word, marek, you might say, conforms with the maras. So again, these are particular verses for those that have, to recognize in their own continuum, those of us who have taken ordination, that although we might be wearing saffron robes or taken ordination, taken on vows, that we may not actually be living up to the actual essence of that. 69. Although the gods give me happiness, I worship evil spirits. I think here the gods, it doesn't mean, do you think it means what gods give you happiness? I offer to the spirits, the dukdre, the poisonous ghosts. Although the Dharma guides me, I deceive the three jewels. Dempa chuki chene konchok. Let's make konchok le. Who are the gods that, pardon?
It says here that the power of his or her two inner demons. What are the two inner demons?
Who do you think the two inner demons are? That's easy. Yeah, I think it must be those. It doesn't mean, Gertrude and Matilda or some other demons that have you around. What does it mean? The gods have given me happiness. What do you think, Dorji? Do the gods give you happiness? What does that mean? The gods give you happiness. It says, although the gods give you happiness, I worship evil spirits.
Is that a poor translation? Or is that
Well, literally it says that. La means God or Deva, but it doesn't have to mean Devas.
I would think, and I'm probably wrong, that not samsaric gods, but maybe, are they talking about Yidam? Maybe?
So Yidams give us happiness? Yidams mean like meditational deities, but we worship. So what is it, like for instance, when we say, the prayer that we say sometimes when we're offering food, Lama Sangye Lama Che, Dejin Lama Gendunte, Kungi Jepo Lama Te, Lama Namla Chobabu, or Kyapsuchi, depends on the verse you're saying. Do you know what that means? Lama Sangye, Guru is Buddha, Lama Che, Guru is Dharma, Dejin Lama Gendunte. Likewise, the Buddha is also Sangha. Kungi Jepo Lama Te. The Lama is the creator of all. Sounds like Christian God, isn't it? Lama Namla Chobabo. I make offering to all lamas. So what does that mean? The Lama is the creator of all. Do you know? Venerable?
All the happiness and goodness that we experience comes from the kindness of the Guru and guiding us from beginningless lifetimes.
I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head. All the happiness, everything that we experience that's virtuous, one can trace back to the Gurus. You might say, excuse me, I learned some things from the Guru, but some things I had by myself. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that qualm coming? But then you go back. Where did you get that quality that you think you had this life? Whether it was inborn, some innate tendency to be kind or something, it was because you cultivated that in previous lives. Because of meeting spiritual friends, meeting the gurus. So I think it's to my mind, it kind of means that. Although the divinities give me happiness. The divinity meaning the gurus and the the Buddhas and the bodhisattvas, they give me happiness not by here Dorji, have like giving me happiness or patting me on the back, but they give me happiness in leading me to create the causes of virtue, causes of happiness, and virtue, leading me to create virtue, causes of happiness, and leading me to avoid negativity. So they give me happiness. So the divine means the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha, the triple gem, give me happiness, but yet I worship these poisonous spirits. Again, this is maybe like Oma was talking about, practicing different kinds of worldly spirits or things that can be dangerous. Although the Dharma guides me, I deceive the three jewels. I'm deceitful. I don't actually practice in accord with their actual guidance. So for instance, if you take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, you should have a mind that relies from the depth of your heart on the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So if you don't, if you just say, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and you don't actually take refuge in the Dharma and the Buddhas and the Sangha, then that's kind of deceiving them. 70. Although I have always resorted to secluded places, I am carried away by distraction. This is interesting. Taktu gompar dene yengwe kier. Maybe you could say, although I continually reside in isolation or in gompas. You know the word gompa? Is this a gompa? So let's go to the gompa. There's got puja in the gompa. Do you know what that means, Georgie? Gompa?
I think gom means meditate, but I'm not sure. Meditation place?
Gompa is meditation place? Actually, gompa, the word that we say gompa actually means secluded place. It doesn't mean gompa. It's gon, G-O-N, gonpa. So many people think, I remember, it was not so long ago, there was one class, someone mentioned that there was gompa, a place that you meditate. It doesn't mean that. Gompa means, a gompa is a place that's meant to be a building that's meant to be secluded, where you can do meditation, but that's not the etymology of the word, like gom, to meditate. This is gompa. So although I continually reside, you can either say in a gompa or in an isolated place, a secluded place, I'm carried away by distractions. Yengwa is distraction. So that means, even putting yourself physically in an isolated place doesn't prevent your mind from being distracted. You carry along with you the inner distractions also, the delusions. Although I request instruction in the holy Dharma and the religious sciences, I cherish divination and shamanism. Oh, this is nice. Damcho means pure Dharma, the Sadharma, the holy Dharma. Although I request instruction, here it says request, it doesn't say instruction. Damcho sukla shune, although having requested the holy Dharma, and sukla is interesting. Sometimes the word for vihara, like an isolated place, another word is suklakang. And sometimes people think that this word might mean that, like an isolated place or a building. But suk comes from the word for the crown, suktor, like ushnisha. And lak means hand. So one etymology is that which comes out of the height, maybe the crown, and is put in your hand. So sort of like that which has a noble origin is made easy for you to understand. So that suklak also refers to the sciences. I think that's how they translate it, religious sciences. Sometimes we talk about the five sciences. That's another name for them, suklak. So although I've requested the holy Dharma and the instruction and different kinds of things. I cherish divination and shamanism. Mo bun kyong. Mo, you know what mo's are. And kyong and bun means bumba. Bumbo, like the native religion or a shamanistic religion of Tibet. So, in the kind of the implication is, although I've requested these teachings and maybe I actually study them, in practice what I do is I throw mo's for people and I practice different kinds of rituals and things. I don't actually put into practice the holy teachings that are really real esoteric teachings are the real overcoming of the two demons in your mind, not overcoming outer demons or making predictions about the future. Once in Dharamsala, when Geshe Darge was teaching, Geshe Nawan Darge, and someone asked, said, "Oh, Geshe-la," there was question and answer. Geshe-la, I had my horoscope done, and it said if I don't make a tanka of Amitabha or someone, I'll be born as a crow in my next life. Is that right? And Geshe-la is sometimes quite wrathful. He said, it's a scathing look at the translator. Later, we found out he criticized the translator for even translating the question. I said, why? You shouldn't have even translated that question. There's so many people, if they're told, it's not that it's wrong. There might be that in some horoscope and astrological calculation that if you do something you can avoid some calamity. But he said in general, the Buddha told us if you practice virtue, you'll find happiness. If you avoid non-virtue, you'll avoid suffering. But we don't listen to that. We want to know particular things like, if you do this, you'll find the handsome, companion. If you do this, you might lead to loss in your business. We want to know those kind of things. So we spend our time in making divinations. Sometimes although some of the great lamas do make divinations, they do it out of great understanding and not out of self-cherishing thought. But it's something that could become a deviation for ordinary beings like ourselves. 70. Although I have always... this is what we just did. 71. Forsaking the moral path to liberation, I cling to my home. Sultim tarlam. So, although I've given up morality, the path of liberation, that might mean given up one's ordination, I embrace the family life. This is talking about someone who's given up ordination. Forsaking the moral path, well, that's not exactly right. Having given up morality, the path of liberation. That's because when we talk about the 3 higher trainings, which some of you are quite aware of because you've brought that up before, the 3 higher trainings, higher training in morality, the higher training in concentration, higher training in wisdom. In fact, Bonnie, you were saying that before, right? You were making some addition. So the way that one practices the moral training of morality, the higher training of morality, is externally to live a life of ordination. So to give that up, having taken that on, to give that up and embrace the family life is... The Buddha, it said that the Buddhas find that quite, I wouldn't say amusing. What's the other word? They wouldn't be amused by that. They would think it's completely foolish because you've actually got the path of liberation. You give that up to embrace the family life. And here there was pouring my happiness into the water. I run after suffering. I think this expression is a little bit like tossing something to the wind. We say tossing something into the wind. Do we use anything like pouring something into the water? Do we have an expression, colloquial expression like that? We do? Oh, down the drain. And there you go. Maybe like that. Tossing it into the ocean so that it's, you don't have it tossing it away. Yeah, down the drain. Good. I toss my happiness into the drain and run after suffering. That's good. I'm pursuing suffering. So this is not saying that everyone who gives up ordination is in that situation. There's so many different causes. One can't judge. Even if someone's guru and they give up ordination, it's said in the teachings that you shouldn't have any disrespect for them. You should try to see them as, at a certain point, putting the benefit of others in higher esteem than their own benefit. But this is talking about individual advice. Having taken on any kind of moral discipline, to give it up in order to take on the family life, just to have companionship and to do trade and so forth, is, from a Buddhist perspective, not the most advantageous way to actually practice. Because what you're doing is you're chasing suffering in that way, having poured the causes of happiness and leisure down the drain, as Don says. Good. 72. Turning away from the gateway to liberation, I wander in remote places. Tarpe jukngok borne sada tim. Having given up the juknok means kind of like the place that you enter something, like the shore. When you what is it called when you put the boat where the boat comes? I don't mean the dock. A fording place, where you can put the boat. Like you're going down the river and there's no place. There's vines and trees. You can't get up, and then there's a place where the land kind of comes down. A place where you can ford. So having given up the ford to liberation, one wanders in all places, sata, to the limits of the land. Despite acquiring the precious jewel of a human body, here it says, I wind up in hell. I nilkam drup. I accomplish the hell realm. Accomplish it. I bring it about. Although you have a precious human body, one uses it. Many people use their precious human body to do no more than accomplishing the causes for hell. So if we think in your own mind, that could be very, very powerful. What am I using this perfect human life for? Sometimes just to experience pleasure, to have leisure, to feel comfortable, to hear sweet ego-pleasing words, to be loved, to have companionship. And in so doing, if that's your main occupation, out of self-cherishing thought, not only are you practicing the self-cherishing thought, but you're accomplishing the hell realm, because you're practicing the various kinds of negative states of mind that can bring hell about. I've forgotten here when it says turning away from gateway to liberation, I wander in remote places. Let me see what Geshe-la said. I've forgotten the context there. Oh, this is linked to the other. I'm not sure he made particular. Verses 72 and 73 deal with people who give up their Dharma study and practice to search for worldly pleasure. Okay, so it means I searching, having given up the ford to liberation, I'm searching everywhere else. It's sort of like, going to the ends of the earth to do everything else. You go to Mount Kilimanjaro, or you do the Hatha Yoga course in Mysore, or you do this or that,
Oh, I was thinking of going on vacation.
Egypt again.
Oh, no, not Egypt.
Egypt was too much. 73. Putting aside the particulars of spiritual development, I engage in business. Leaving my guru's school, I idle about the town. Chuki gyurke shakne sonke drup. Songba means commerce, like selling, buying and selling. Ke means profit. So sonke can mean just profit itself, or and here he says that I engage in business. It's sort of like I I accomplish what I think is profitable, I do business, having given up the particular transformation of the Dharma, the spiritual transformative qualities of that. Lama Chudra is a word for, I can't remember the Sanskrit word, is a word for school, sort of like, or a place where you study. This could be called Chudra. This is a place where you study. So having given up the Guru's Chudra, having set that aside, I wander through towns and cities, or towns and places, Trong Yul. What did he say here? I idle about the town. Okay. So again, this is verse 73. It said, these two verses, 72 and 73, are about people who give up their Dharma study and practice a search for worldly pleasure, money, or possessions. Such persons will only wind up suffering in hell as a result of their self-cherishing behavior. It sounds kind of heavy, doesn't it? Sound like we can't, almost like we can't have any fun. What do you think? You can't have any fun if you're a Dharma practitioner?
Very little, it seems like.
So you have to learn how to have fun doing puja. You can't have any other fun? Well, it depends.
Mama used to say, enjoy as much as possible, dear, but without attachment.
Depends on if you're doing the Milarepa sadhana, then you can have daily enjoyments.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
In the Hinayana tradition, one really renounces all kinds of pleasures. And in order to keep that up, it takes an incredibly strong mind. That's why the Sangha was created, and why the symbiotic relationship between, why? Many reasons, but the symbiotic relationship between the Sangha and the laity to make it easier, because that kind of deprivation is difficult to perpetuate for a long period of time. Does that make sense? To avoid attachment. The Mahayana, on the other hand, in the Sutra of the Three Heaps, which is one chapter, one section of one of the great Mahayana sutras, in that, I'm not sure who was asking, the Upali is talking to Buddha, and also Shariputra is talking to Buddha about the bodhisattvas' morality. And the Buddha explains that in the Hinayana, one takes as his greatest, the greatest fault is attachment. So one avoids attachment, especially, right? You'd never touch gold, you'd never embrace a member of the opposite sex and so forth. You would, because that becomes a big obstacle to that enterprise of achieving liberation, which you can only keep that up for a short period of time. That's why generally the Shravakas attain their liberation in some short number of lives, 16 lives or something like that. The bodhisattvas, on the other hand, take their main the main defeat for them is anger and hatred. So they don't take attachment as the main fault. So the bodhisattva path, in order to perpetuate that path, sometimes one has to use the objects of the pleasure, objects of the senses, as kind of medicine and so forth, even diversions, recognizing it as one of the stages of, what was it called? Enthusiastic perseverance. The enthusiastic perseverance of rest, you might say. If you keep on pressing again and again and again, sometimes you get burned out, and sometimes you have to stop completely, isn't it? You burn yourself out. You ever hear that expression? Get lunged out. Whereas if you can pace yourself and relax as you're practicing, because the enterprise is much longer lasting to achieve enlightenment. It's not something so brief as the Hinayana path.
Oh,
Yes?
but how can the Hinayana path be brief when they talk about eons and eons and eons of stuff, you know, that you have to overcome, and it takes eons and eons and eons? Isn't that the Hinayana path? I don't think that's brief. I mean, you know.
Is that the Hinayana path? It takes eons and eons, 3 countless great eons?
Yeah, I think so.
That's the Bodhisattva path, that the Buddha, that's the Bodhisattva path that Lord Buddha progressed. Not eons and eons and eons. The Pratyeka Buddhas take a longer time, you know, bordering on eons to achieve their arhatship, their solitary realization. But that's with a particular kind of stubborn kind of mind. Generally, the Hinayana arhats, they achieve their arhatship in a very short number of lifetimes, maybe up to 16 lifetimes, almost a little bit similar to like what might be achieved in the practice of Tantra. But they achieve liberation. But their practice requires very strict adherence to avoiding pleasure, whereas the Mahayana doesn't see that as the great vice. In fact, in Tantrayana, as Lama Yeshe used to say, Tantra has even a quite radical view from Hinayana. Hinayana would say, look at this excrement, this, what is it called? This stuff?
Okay.
No, this, Thea, what is this called? Trail mix or something like this? You know? Something like that, you know? This is excrement, this is to be avoided. In Tantra, if there's something that can fuel your path, but one has to be like a peacock, not like me, it can actually make your practice more glorious by, I'll just give an example, I'm not a peacock, but, you know, today. To utilize pleasure in the path. So Lama used to say it's like the Hinayana sees all of these different kinds of samsaric pleasures as detrimental, whereas in Tantra, there's a way of utilizing them as fuel for your trip to enlightenment, like fuel for the rocket, everything, all the pleasures. So here we're learning how to use even the fuel of the adverse conditions, right? We're not, and later, if you can practice this, then maybe you can practice the tantric. Maybe that's a good way of thinking. If you can use the adverse conditions as fuel for your practice, then maybe you'll be a suitable recipient for the tantric practice of using desire in the path. Because at first, if you try to use desire in the path, it's like the crow trying to eat the poisonous plants. Remember the example at the beginning of the text? And actually kill them. Abandoning my own livelihood, 74, I plunder others' property. Forsaking my parents' food, I rob others of sustenance. A little bit, maybe it's different words. Abandoning my own livelihood kind of implies, again, taking ordination, you know, not seeking one's own livelihood. I plunder others' property. Here, I think that actually it says, dugo drok. This is, I think, referring to Gedungi Due Godok, which means one of the, the 5 actions of immediate retribution? Do you know, Sarah? What are they?
Kill your mother or your father.
Kill your mother, your father, those are 2.
To draw blood from the Buddha.
Draw blood from the Buddha with intention.
Cause disunity among the Sangha.
Draw disunity on the Sangha. To kill an arhat, yeah. Kill one's mother, one's father, an arhat, to cause schism in the Sangha and to draw blood intentionally from the Tathagata. Then there's 5 actions close to the close to these, secondary, like when we say the general confession. Do you know the general confession? Uhula was written by Ashvagosha. You know who Ashvagosha was? Do you know who Ashvagosha was? Ashvagosha was a Hindu great scholar who was debating the monks at Nalanda in the past at the time of Nagarjuna. And the monks were about to lose, and they made a torma, and they prayed to Mahakala. And out of the torma, a black crow flew to South India, supposedly, where Nagarjuna was debating with Aryadeva, his disciple. And Nagarjuna was preparing him for this debate with Ashvagosha. And so Aryadeva came up north, and actually Nagarjuna warned him. Guru's instruction was, don't debate with anyone along the way. And he said not to do certain things. And because of his not obeying his Guru's order, he lost his eye. He lost his eye, and he wasn't able to regain his sight. That's why some people think Robert Thurman is an emanation of Aryadeva, because he has one eye. Anyway, this joke. So he got up and he debated with Ashvagosha, and he actually beat Ashvagosha in debate, although Ashvagosha was defeating all of the monks at Nalanda, the great monastery. And Ashvagosha, as a result of this, was supposed to become Buddhist, but he was imprisoned in the library in Nalanda, and because he was resentful, he wasn't going to do this after having tried to escape to the limits of space. Anyway, it's a long story. And he's in the library, and he's reading the Buddhist text out of boredom. Saying, there's some prophecy. Ashvagosha, great Hindu master, will become a great Buddhist master, having given up the wrong view of Hinduism. He said, oh. So he wrote many prayers and praises of Buddha to help purify the negative karma that he'd created in criticizing the Buddha Dharma. One of them is called the General Confession that we do during when we do our sojong, bi-monthly confession, and at other times. It's similar in the prayers when you have the confession of the 35 Buddhas. There's also the General Confession that comes. You know that one. So in there it says, I confess the 5 actions of immediate retribution and the actions that are close to them. So the actions that are close to the 5 actions of immediate retribution, one of them is close to causing schism in the Sangha is to deprive the Sangha of their livelihood. And that's what this is referring to, I think. It's not talking about I plunder others' property in general. It means I deprive, the Sangha of their livelihood. Very, very heavy negative karma. Even to take one blade of grass or something from the Sangha is supposed to be very, very heavy negative karma.
What are the others?
What the other up? The close to me. Okay, what are they? So similar to I've forgotten now. I remember. Similar to let me see. So I'll have to look up. In the 35 Confession Buddha Sutra, there are some of the Buddhas in one of the commentaries that explains they help to purify certain of these particular karmas of immediate retribution, and some that are close to those of immediate retribution. I can't remember exactly now. Like
disrespecting your parents instead of killing them?
No, not that easy. No, it's a little heavier than that. Killing a prophesized bodhisattva. I'll have to look up. I'll look for you next time. Let me just mention one more here, and then we'll finish up. Where are we? 75. Oh, it says, forsaking my parents' food, I rob others of sustenance. I think it means my family's rangi passe. it means giving up the food that my family has left me. I rob others. Anyway, I'm not quite. Maybe you can see from the commentary the significance there. Then the next one, aha. In Tibetan it says Emma. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Does it say the 5 actions of immediate retribution?
I think so.
Maybe in I don't think it gives right here. Anyway, it doesn't tell what it just says that the 5 actions are similar to that. Okay, maybe it does in the index, but I'll check for you next time. I've forgotten offhand. Aha, although my endurance for meditation is small, my precognition is sharp. So it's like those of you tonight who knew, I knew you were going to call on me, you said, right? Here it says ngoshe, that means supernatural powers, like the clairvoyances. I have sharp clairvoyance, although my endurance for meditation is weak. Though I have not realized even the beginning of the path, that means the points of the path. Here it says lam nam masin dome kangbagyok. Though I have not realized the points of the path, I run around with no purpose. Purposelessly run around. So what does that mean? Although my endurance for meditation is small, my clairvoyance is sharp. That would sound to be contradictory, right? Because you need to have good meditation to have clairvoyance. This verse addresses those people who wish to gain high supernatural powers, such as seeing the future or reading others' minds. These powers are the result of certain kinds of yogic practices. But practicing yoga to obtain these powers without the necessary basic religious training and understanding is merely the work of the inner demons. It's kind of like being the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the mind. I hope I don't meet Arnold to have to apologize to him sometime. I often use that, the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the mind. To acquire such powers in order to boast about them is to cheat oneself and others. You need to start at the beginning of the path. So, you could develop different kinds of clairvoyance and powers and so forth, but unless one of the great Kadampa Geshis said, let alone the 5, someone asked him, would you rather have the 5 clairvoyances or the 3 fundamentals of the path, something like that? And he said, leave alone the fundamentals of the path. Rather than the 5 clairvoyances, I'd rather even just be pointed in the right direction. Much more important rather than having clairvoyance or power, or of course you can make other kinds of things, fame and beauty and so forth, washboard abs, or I heard now, I told you before, the new one, it's not washboard abs anymore, it's six-pack abs. Rather than having clairvoyance, which one might think is great, someone says, he's a real powerful lama. She's a real powerful yogini. Whoa. Clairvoyance, some power to make things happen. Those kinds of powers will not necessarily help you at all if you don't have the fundamentals of the path. So let's quit here and dedicate the virtue that we've created. Try to calm your mind. And make, first of all, conventional dedication. Think, due to these merits, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha for the welfare of all sentient beings in order to bring them into that very same state. Pure, blissful happiness, security, freedom of all suffering. How wonderful that would be if due to these merits, they could actually bring that event about. Then seal that in the emptiness of the three spheres. The emptiness of the merits being dedicated, the emptiness of the goal being dedicated to, and the emptiness of the act of dedication, the self connecting these karmic seeds up with their prospective results through the act of aspiration.